Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gersh1, and today we're going to be talking about the Space Marines again as we get into the Minotaurs chapter. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K lore videos every single day, and if you have any suggestions, please comment down below. Now thank our patrons on Patreon. It's because of them that we can do this. Link in the description if you guys want to support us. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the Minotaurs. The Minotaurs are a loyalist Space Marine chapter whose actual origins and foundings remain unknown. The Space Marine formation, by this name in today's Imperium, appears to bear little resemblance to the actual accounts of its past. They are a Space Marine chapter of brutal reputation within the Imperium of Man. The Minotaurs have long been the brunt of suspicion and bitterness by other Space Marine chapters. There are even those within the Ordo Hereticus of the Inquisition who believe the Minotaurs possess unknown ties to the High Lords of Terra. While much of the Minotaurs' records going back over the last millennia have been ascertained through sifting through battle archives from across the Imperium, much of their history before this point is not simply lost, but has been deliberately suppressed and sealed under binding, laid down by the High Lords of Terra that even the authority of the Inquisition cannot circumvent. It has been acknowledged that there was a Space Marine chapter of the name Minotaur created as part of the 21st founding, the so-called Cursed Founding. But whether or not the chapter bearing that same name has become the one of today has become subject of much debate amongst Imperial scholars. The Minotaurs of the 21st founding rapidly gained a reputation as a force whose ferociousness and fury on the battlefield were all but unmatched. As time progressed, their tendencies to shun the command of others and their erratic gene seed tithes to the Adeptus Mechanicus, combined with the diverse curses and genetic corruptions that had seemed to afflict other chapters of their founding, raised much dark suspicion about the nature of the Minotaurs and the secrets they might be hiding. The few fragmented records that remain show the chapter's gene seed branded as chimeric. This, as blasphemous as it may seem now, may have indicated that the chapter's genetic material was either produced from a prohibited source, mixed with the heretical genetic pool, or somehow tampered with during its creation. Many Astarte scions of the chapter, created during the 21st founding, were found to have their genetic seeds experimented on. The Minotaurs are more than likely to have been amongst those who had their genetic seed tampered with or altered in some way. It is likely that the Minotaurs barely controlled battle fury and desired to shun those they should have called comrades was a result of some particular curse in their blood. But whether or not their affliction has mastered them, or they have finally mastered it, remains unknown. From the middle of the 38th millennium onward, the Minotaurs all but have slipped away from Imperial records, their deeds and battle honors suppressed or expunged by a series of edicts and data purges. When the chapter reappeared millennia later, it was noted that they had a tendency to respond quickly and without question to a call to arms from the High Lords of Terra, even when the case was to reprimand, apprehend, or even destroy formerly loyal Space Marines who had been declared renegade or had accusations of suspected transgressions logged against them. This gave the Minotaurs a fell reputation as a chapter. In particular, the Ultramarines and its myriad of successor chapters are known to bear considerable ill will toward the Minotaurs, and will not fight beside them after the Minotaurs' near extinction of the Inceptor chapter. Since its return to prominence, some Imperial scholars who have studied this reclusive chapter's actions have noted the discrepancies between the Minotaurs chapter of the present and that of the past, both in terms of structure and behavior. This speculation also pertains toward the Minotaur's gene seed, of which tithes have been logged but remain classified at the highest level. Since their reemergence, some Imperial commanders have gone on record as finding the Space Marines of the Minotaur chapter to be brooding and malignant warriors, far from the epitome of honor and righteousness. The power armor worn by the Battle Brothers of this chapter typically bears iconography denoting rank and battlefield record. Many of these symbols have meanings hidden from outsiders of the chapter. It is believed that the numeration and colorization of the lambda helican glyph markings, common to the Minotaur heraldry, refers to kills against worthy opponents in single combat, likely in increasing order of magnitude. The Minotaurs Chapter original color scheme was yellow with red decorations, usually warning markings. The Minotaurs contemporary color scheme is that of a bronze armor with some darkened red on the shoulder plates. The chapter's original badge is a blue bull's head on a yellow background. The contemporary chapter badge is a red bull's head with black horns on a bronze background. Members of the elite first company wear the variant of the chapter badge, a bronze bull's head on the dark red background. The Minotaurs conform to both the structural and squad level patterns of the Codex Astartes in terms of broad organization, but at a tactical level, this chapter differs significantly in its general approach to warfare. The Minotaurs prefer to operate as a whole, or at least in as few divisions of its force as possible in any given theater of war, concentrating and thereby maximizing its destructive power. This strategy has allowed the chapter to excel at siegecraft and in combat against monstrous opponents, which they can overwhelm by sheer weight of numbers if need be. Unlike some Space Marine chapters, some of the Minotaurs' key tactics are partly dependent on the use of superior attrition within a confined area of engagement, the chapter's commanders perhaps less mindful of the fate of their battle brothers than some, so long as victory is achieved. Two significant factors aid the Minotaurs in their chosen pattern of warfare: their excellent supply of heavy arms and war machinery, and a markedly rapid influx of new neophytes to replace ongoing losses due to attrition. Their exact source of their war material has remained unconfirmed, but they have been observed to operate using large and replenishing stockpiles of tanks and heavy armor, primarily Vindicators and Predators, as tactical support vehicles. The Minotaurs have also been observed to have widespread access to supplies of the advanced Mark 8 errata power armor, and commonly field much of the First Company as Terminators in combat. During the Orphean War, the chapter was observed to field no less than 10 Contemptor pattern dreadnoughts, indicating that the Minotaurs possess an unusual number of these ancient dreadnoughts. Another unusual aspect of the Minotaurs is the method in which they are able to replace losses in manpower so quickly. The speed of transition between Neophyte, Scout Marine, and full Battle Brother in a chapter is brief compared to that of any other Space Marine chapters. This is explained by the use of extremely high levels of program cycle indoctrination and neurocerebral surgery by the chapter. This program accelerates the recruit's progression and is continued during the deployment as ongoing treatment to reinforce the mental conditioning administered by the chapter's apothecaries. These techniques, though not forbidden as heretical, have inherent dangers that could carry a great risk of damaging the subjects physically and mentally more than any other chapter. Most Space Marine chapters consider the more studied training and battlefield educated of their neophytes to be a key component in tempering the soul of the warrior, rather than the dangerous artificial techniques employed by the Minotaurs to replace their often self-inflicted losses. The Minotaurs chapter of the Adeptus Astartes has a reputation alongside that which it maintains ruthlessness and destructiveness for the quality and capacity of its armories. This factor is most evident in the large number and diversity of dreadnought frames the Minotaurs maintain in active service, as well as the more common types and patterns found in the Space Marine chapters of the 41st millennium. The Minotaurs maintain numerous examples, commonly existing only as extreme rarities in many other chapters' armories, a case in point in the Contemptor pattern dreadnought. Once a commonplace pattern in the ancient days of the Great Crusade in the late 30th millennium, the Contemptor and its sub-patterns were arguably the apotheosis of Space Marine dreadnought design. They feature many systems and technologies in common with the feared battled automatons of the now lost Lego Cybernetica, including compact automatic reactors and energy shield systems, whose art of constructing is widely believed to have long since passed beyond use. For the Minotaurs chapter to be able to field at least 10 such war machines against the Necrons is remarkable for a Space Marine organization of the current era. The Minotaurs seem to bear little respect for anyone or anything except the Emperor of Mankind and the High Lords of Terra, for whom they have displayed fanatic and unquestioning loyalty. Chapter tends to show no love for civility when dealing with individual Imperial commanders and other Space Marine chapters, but they have been known to show pleasure in testing their skills against worthy foes. Some speculate that perhaps the Minotaurs consider their fellow Astartes as particularly worthy. In one well-recorded incident, the chapter nearly came to blows with the Genesis chapter after deliberately insulting the name of Marneus Calgar. Bloody conflict between them was only averted by the arrival of the fresh wave of orcs from the Arcturian Empire. Given this desire for testing themselves against their fellow Space Marines, it is unsurprising that the Minotaurs would appear during the Bad Up War. The Astral Claws and the other secessionist chapters would have certainly proved to be worthy foes. Some Imperial commanders who have served with the Minotaurs since their re-emergence have gone on record hinting that the chapter is at the edge of madness or heresy, describing the defenses and security precautions taken by them, even when dealing with suspicious allies, as obsessive, bordering on the paranoia. How many Minotaurs have the opportunity or the temperament to stand a vigil of the Long Watch is unknown, and the chapter has not been well represented at Watch Fortress Erico in the Jericho Reach. Their desire to operate as a complete chapter has been a key reason why the Minotaurs are very rarely seen in the Death Watch. Now let's get into some notable Minotaur campaigns. The Night Reapers' path to corruption began when they were first condemned to crusade on the fringes of the Lana Rift region, following their actions during the abortive defense of Salvation Gamma, in the midst of the Constantineous Ironclasm. Their crime had been negligence of duty, when confronted by a massive counterattack by a dozen Chaos Warbands, drawn from the Ironclasm revolts, alongside an unknown number of degenerate mutant hordes, drawn from the edge worlds of the sector. The Night Reapers had abandoned the Shrine World as both effectively indefensible and of negligible strategic worth. Rather than allowing the world to fall, the Night Reapers turned their own weapons on the Basilica cities, and granted the pilgrims and refugees who had sought harbor there a merciful death. The rage of the ecclesiarchy over this loss was boundless, and ensured the Night Reapers chapter censure of the High Lords of Terra. Torn away from their fortress monastery and chapter homeworld, and condemned to the perilous and thankless task of policing the outer reaches of the Lana Rift, the Night Reapers bore their punishment with grim obedience, but little contribution, or at least it appeared so. Within a decade, however, Imperial contact with the chapter, which had long carried a reputation for ruthless efficiency, independence, and technical aptitude, grew infrequent. Official contact ceased, and such second-hand reports of them that could be gathered pointed towards steady increase of deviations from the Codex Astartes doctrines, tactics, and equipment in their ranks. In the year 989 of the 41st millennium, some 6 standard years after the last Imperial contact, the Night Reapers were declared excommunicate traitorous after forensic examination of the wreckage found in the Guthias Belt provided incontrovertible evidence of the chapter's direct responsibility for the destruction of the rogue trader fleet of Baron Strauss Yen. This followed a series of other raids and incidences where the involvement of the now renegade chapter had been suspected, but firm enough evidence could not be found to blame them, while several Imperial expeditions to find the Night Reapers had disappeared without a trace. The first Space Marine chapter to respond to the call to find and punish the Night Reapers comprised a 4-company-strong force of the Avenging Suns chapter, who alongside Imperial Navy support set out into the Rift in search of the renegade chapter. Responding to a distress call from the Imperial outpost of Svargo Wells, the Night Reapers ambushed the Avenging Suns and forced them into a humiliating retreat, capturing one of the strike cruisers, wrecking a second, and badly mauling their would-be destroyers. The shame of the Avenging Suns' defeat, which they blamed on the Night Reapers' use of unknown warp flame weapons that bypassed their starship's void shields, moved the High Lords into direct action, and 2 full chapters of Space Marines, the Red Templars and the Minotaurs, alongside considerable local support from the fleets and defense forces of the neighboring sectors, were directly tasked with the destruction of the Night Reapers. This was to be done before their threat could grow any further. lest they become a beacon to other renegades and malcontents in an already troubled region. The harrowing of the Night Reapers was to take a further 3 years of running battles to reach its fruition, and it was a campaign in which, for the Imperial chapters, the Red Templars, experts as they were in search and destroy and pursuit operations, they were to be the hounds, and the Minotaurs, with their brute strength and aggression, would be the hunter, ready to deal the death blow. The Night Reapers fought with savage resistance across a dozen star systems, and in a score of ship-to-ship battles, as they were driven before the Imperials, bloodying their pursuers at every turn. It soon transpired that the Night Reapers, having thrown off the rule of the Emperor, had sought advantage in innovation, their tech marines adapting Xenos weapon technology originating from the cursed and near-extinct Helgramonite race to their own end, and their masters striking pacts with the servants of the arch-enemy to further their cause. From this, the Night Reapers gained the strength to resist the Imperial onslaught for a time, but their relentless foes eventually cornered the bulk of the surviving Night Reapers at the Perron Cross, a massive pre-human space wreckage large enough to have developed its own thin atmosphere and parasitic life over the long ages. Here, the Night Reapers were tunneling into the ancient artificial core of the wreck, kilometers deep, in search of a weapon that they believed would be sufficient to rid themselves of the Imperial forces who now encircled and besieged them. Events as they transpired at the bitter point of the siege remain shrouded in confusion, but what is known is that at the height of the Minotaurs' attack, the Grey Knight strike cruiser Equinos Blade and a force of Grey Knights under the command of Brother Captain Denicus arrived in orbit around the Perron Cross. Entering the fire zone, they ordered the Imperial forces to concede to their authority and pull back from the assault. The Minotaurs, however, were not included to this course. The retreat of the Loyalist forces paved the way for Brother Captain Denicus of the Grey Knights to conduct a teleport assault into the depths of the Perron Cross as the battle raged on. What then transpired remains unknown, but sometime shortly afterwards, the Perron's cross structure broke into burning fragments, riven by a series of gigantic level explosions. The demise of Perron Cross led to the complete loss of the Grey Knights, and a substantial but undefined number of Minotaur Spacemarines, along with heavy damage to the Equinos Blade and the death of all those left on board. Asterion Moloch, the stern chapter master of the Minotaurs, is known to have survived the incident, as he was once again witness commanding his chapter in battle some months later, while the Grey Knights Lord of Titan and the Ordo Malleus have remained curiously silent over their losses. As for the Night Reapers chapter, it is believed that the fiery death of Perron Cross served as the funeral pyre for their once loyal chapter. Whatever profane secrets surround them are believed to have been buried there as well. Now let's take a look at some of the Minotaurs' relics. The Minotaur chapter holds many relics, one of which is the Black Spear. A deadly relic weapon of unknown province, the Black Spear is similar to some regards to the sacred arm of the Adeptus Astartes. The spear is a power weapon of remarkable potency, able to pierce even Terminator battle plates. It also incorporates a single-shot laser weapon sufficiently potent enough to be used as an anti-tank weapon if needed. The Black Spear is currently wielded by Chapter Master Asterion Moloch, and is the ceremonial badge of office for every master of the Minotaurs. Another chapter relic is the Unmaker Touch. In many chapters, the mighty Chain Fist is a weapon that is used only in the direst of conflicts, as the armor of most battle brothers is insufficient to bear the weight and supply the power of such a weapon. The Minotaur's great stock of Terminator armor means that they are able to bring forth such weapons more easily than most. Of the terrible weapons so mounted, few are more feared than the Chain Fist called Unmaker's Touch. Its potent power field makes a mockery of armor and vehicles, and has also served admirably against the creations of heretics and other unliving foes. The Minotaurs possess a mighty chapter fleet composed of no less than 12 strike cruisers and at least 1 battle barge at the time of the Badap War. At the start of the Orphean War, the Minotaurs chapter fleet had expanded to consist of 3 battle barges, of which 2 were destroyed during the conflict, and 8 strike cruisers as well. The Minotaurs battle barge, Fidelitas Lamba, sacrificed itself by ramming the Necron flagship, a Cairn-class tomb ship called the Death Hand, during the climax of the Orphean War, causing substantial damage to the flagship and driving it away. The Daughter of Tempest was taken as a spoil of war from the Lamenters chapter during the Bad App War. This warship was shot asunder by a crossfire of Scythe-class harvester ships during the Orphean War. The Stympholos was one of the warships of the Minotaurs chapter fleet that took part in the orbital phase of the Battle of Amra Prime during the Orphean War and emerged with a surprisingly small amount of battle damage for the massive void ship battle. One of the most notable Minotaur campaigns that revealed their suspicious nature occurred during the Vengeance from the Void campaign, across 100 scattered systems in the western marshes of the Segmentum Solar. Cult uprisings led by a corps of Chaos Spacemarine warbands drawn from the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, and World Eaters traitor legions bring entire planetary governments to their knees in a year of blood and anarchy. With the whole section on the brink of collapse, events took a dramatic turn when a combined force of the Adeptus Astartes emerged from the black depths beyond the Spiral Arm and launched a sudden and overwhelming attack directly upon the uprising command. Though many Space Marines fell in glory, the warlords of the traitor factions were slain, and the uprising fractured into 1,000 localized rebellions, which were soon put down by local forces. Subsequent inquisitorial studies claim that these Space Marines were drawn from several chapters, including the Minotaurs, Carcharodons, Death Eagles, and Angels of Absolution. Other evidence, however, including their estimated founding and projected deployment date, contradict these assertions. In the year 425 of the 41st millennium, when the Minotaurs reappeared again for the first time in a millennia, during the suppression of the Macarian heresy, they were a chapter familiar through their fell reputation, and yet profoundly changed. Equipped to the highest imperial standards, they fought as an integrated and highly flexible force, and were based upon a powerful chapter fleet, operating more than a dozen strike cruisers. No less brutal than their ancient reputation suggests, they fought in what was nevertheless a more considered and controlled manner than that heard in the ancient tales. During the suppression, it was the Minotaurs who formed the spearhead of the battle group, which shattered the petty star empire of the outlaw Colonel Lyris of the 11th Kaldu Armored Corps. Their chapter's land raiders blasting apart the famed tanks of the elite Kandusine Immortals on the icy plains of Gyro Prime. They also carried out exterminatus orders on the hive world of Duval and the sword realm of the Hope Cluster, while on the ocean world of Nereus, they hunted down and obliterated the Xenos-possessed remnants of the Imperial Pallidus Chapter 4th Company in the maze of the subsurface cavern cities, poisoning the seas of this once vital agri-world. The Euxine incident was an action of which the Minotaurs gained the most infamy during the Markian heresy, and involved the near destruction of 2 Imperial Space Marine chapters, the Doom Warriors and the Inceptors, who had become locked in conflict. With the 2 combatant chapters refusing calls to end their battle, and aid with the pacification of the Markian Crusade conquered worlds, the Minotaurs were dispatched to sunder the 2 and end the strife. Caring nothing for the cause of rights of the 2 chapters, the Minotaurs attacked in full force. Overmatched and broken, the Doom Warriors fled the system almost immediately in a barely organized retreat. The remaining Inceptor Space Marines were forced into a humiliating surrender. A fewer than 100 Battle Brothers survived the Minotaurs' assault. This created friction between the Minotaurs and the Ultramarines and their successor chapters, who have sworn vengeance on the Minotaurs should the opportunity arise, and have banned them from entering the realm of Ultramar. In the year 760 of the 41st millennium, the defense of Hermetica was a noble imperial military campaign carried out by the Minotaurs Spacemarine chapter against the forces of the Word-Bearers Traitor Legion on the world of Hermetica. This vital hive world was the capital of the Konman sector in the Segmentum Solar, and it came under massive assault from a vast mutant horde, numbering in the millions, led by the armies of the Word-Bearer's Dark Apostle, Lycan the Devourer. The chaos attack arrived from the warp rift that opened on the system's edge and was carried aboard a colossal space hulk designated the Nightmare Paradox. The planet was well protected, owing to the suddenness of the onslaught and the sheer scale of the chaotic attack. The system's outer defenses were soon overwhelmed, and the transcontinental hive cities of the planet itself swiftly became battlegrounds, on which its beleaguered defenders fought desperately against the tide of damned horrors that assailed them. In the year 760 of the 41st millennium, the Minotaurs chapter was the first outside force to respond to the planet's straggled pleas for help, and using their chapter's fleet firepower for cover, they cut off the invaders from orbit and swiftly counter-assaulted the main chaotic foothold on the planet of Hive Casabon, entering the Basilica of the Saint Lesro Antaroki. The Minotaurs' assault was devastating and indiscriminate, and after a heavy bombardment of their landing zone, they smashed through the cathedral's district plaza and temples in an attack column of heavy armor, heedless of the cost in civilian lives. The Minotaurs' advance was relentless, blasting apart any strong point they encountered, and driving the enemy before them along with thousands of trapped civilians fleeing the carnage, but who had nowhere to run. Swiftly, the cathedral complex itself was encircled and bombarded. Its kilometer-high main spire toppled in a crossfire of turbo laser strikes from the wings of the Minotaurs' Thunderhawk gunships. Into this storm of debris and ash, the Terminators and assault squads of the chapter attacked to wipe out any survivors, led by their chapter master, Moloch, at the forefront of the attack. Fighting his way into the depths of the Basilica, it was Moloch who slaughtered the foul, demon-possessed bodyguards, and struck a mortal blow to their hulking, toad-like master. But before the fatal stroke could be dealt to the Dark Apostle, he fled into the warp through the use of their black arts. The degenerated mutant tides fought on, but now leaderless and without direction. It was beaten back and contained until the arrival of the Imperial 17th Battle Group and Imperial Guard regiments from Necromunda, which purged the world of the Chaos Taint. Deflected from its course of Nova Cannon strikes, the Hulk Nightmare Paradox, now silent, occupies a quarantine orbit in the distant reach of the star system, awaiting further detailed examination by the Grey Knights and the agents of the Adeptus Mechanicus. In the year 907 of the 41st millennium, the Minotaurs arrived in the Maelstrom Zone of the Ultima Segmentum, answering the direct call from the acting head Inquisitor for more Space Marines to join the Loyalist cause against the secessionist chapters. The conflict was in its fourth year of open warfare, and the Minotaurs committed their entire strength to the war. 10 companies and 11 capital ships of various types. While the chapter coordinated their efforts with the Loyalist command, they operated largely independent throughout the conflict, striking targets as they saw fit. The viciousness of the chapter's reputation for leaving no survivors among those that resisted them quickly grew, and remained uncontested until the arrival of the even more savage Carcharodon chapter. The Minotaurs gained several important victories during this time, effectively destroying the secessionists on multiple worlds. The action of which their fame would spread far beyond would be its wholesale defeat of the Lamenters chapter in a close-quarter Space Marine battle in the Orpita system in the closing days of the early Badab uprising in the 908 year of the 41st millennium. Finally, the Minotaurs withdrew from the Maelstrom Zone in the year 913 of the 41st millennium, after the fall of the Badab Primus, taking with them several former Lamenters warships to replace their own losses. And finally, in the year 989 of the 41st millennium, the Minotaurs saw action on Ryan's world during the attempt to reclaim the Crimson Fist homeworld from the Orcs. And those were 40 facts on the Minotaurs chapter. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. More videos to come. If you have a specific Space Marine chapter that we have not covered in the past, please comment down below, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. This was Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Always used to put my freedom